man that I've never heard of before in my life. Okay, so let's get going, and we are going to get out of here sooner than hopefully you think. If you want to take the survey and you don't have a handout, feel free to scan that and check it out. Respect in relationships. One foundational principle that I want you guys to go. Okay, so I was a preacher for like 14 years, so forgive me if I go a little sideways here. This is not so much me preaching a sermon, but I just want you to know one principle that's going to be very critical for us as we engage on this little journey that we have through some principles about community engagement. If you can remember nothing else, my hope is you remember this orientation to the people around us. So this is a passage from Exodus 3 verse 7. If you know the Exodus story, the Israelites were enslaved under the rule of Pharaoh in Egypt. It was miserable for them. They were crying out. They were desperate for something to change. And then of course, God calls Moses. Moses goes and does his thing for a while and he kills somebody, and that's not maybe so great, but then he meets a burning bush in the desert, and it's God himself. And God is telling Moses things are about to change for Israel. And here's what he says in Exodus 3 verse 7. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me. What do the blue words have in common? Remember, this is God saying something about himself and what he's about to do. And the theological principle here is not just supposed to remain with God. All of these terms are words of relational proximity. Especially back then, I couldn't see you unless you were relatively close to me. Does that make sense? So if you were in misery, I would not have been able to see it unless I was close to it. Now you might say, well, there's I don't know if there's binoculars back. And then is there? Probably not. Maybe telescopes, but you know what I'm saying. You can only see someone if you're relatively close to them. Similarly, you can only hear them. It says, I heard them crying out. God is only able to hear that because he's close. He sees, he hears, he feels something about their suffering because he's experiencing it alongside with them. And then he says, I have come down to rescue them. How did the Israelites know that they were seen and heard and God has come down? How did they know that? This didn't remain mysterious and in the clouds for them. He came down through people. He worked through Moses. And one of the things that I want you to know is that relational proximity to those who are hurting and suffering is like a requirement to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. These were not meant to just stay with God. These are actually supposed to dictate how we operate in our relationships. Are we the kinds of people that are out among the cries of those who are suffering or vulnerable or hurting? Does that characterize who we are and how we engage in our communities? All that we do, all the work that we engage in with our neighbors in need, all the prep and the planning and the volunteer work, the very best work that we do starts with attending to the cries of those who are suffering and the pain that we see, that we feel alongside with our neighbors, that we're in the midst of. And that cannot be done without relational proximity. There's an author named Jamar Tisby. He's like a professor and historian, theologian, all these other things. And one of the things that he says is you're not going to have the right level of empathy and solidarity for suffering people unless you're close to people who are suffering. That's kind of a no-brainer, right? But sometimes we don't think about that. He goes on to say that you're not going to have the right kind of pastoral concern for the vulnerable unless you are around people who, in Matthew 25, Jesus calls, quote, the least of these. Hence, the name of this workshop is Respect and Relationships. We're going to go over, you guys with me? 3 key ideas, okay? The first is that poverty, material poverty, is relational, not just material. The second is that doing with rather than doing for can promote dignity. And the third is amplifying community strengths can have greater impact than addressing just their needs. You might have a lot of questions about what those mean. That's fine. Hopefully, before we get out of here today, I'll have cleared some of those things up for us. But let's start with the first one. Poverty is relational, not just material. Deuteronomy 10, verse 19. If you were at the little devotional last night that we had, you probably remember that this is in the context of God laying out all sorts of laws for his people. They didn't know how to be a nation yet because they had just escaped Egypt, and God was helping them establish how then do they live as a people in harmony under this new life of freedom. And so he's laying out all these different laws and regulations. And one of the things that he tells the Israelites is, I want you, he says, God, executes justice for the orphan and the widow and shows his love for the stranger by giving him food and clothing. So show your love for the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. When God is beginning to address the Israelites about helping those among them in material poverty, he reminds them of their own slavery in Egypt. He says, I want you to remember when you're approaching people who are in need that you were once too in need, just like them. There's a shared humanity between you and those who are around you who are hurting that you have. And that is important for them to remember their own poverty as they engage with those who are in poverty currently. Hold on to that thought, because we're going to come back to it in just a little bit. But my question for you is, and you can just shout out maybe one word answers, is if you had to guess how people in the United States typically define poverty, how would they do it? What words come to mind? Material stuff, like things, homeless, someone. Financial, Randy, thank you. Randy, by the way, I know him from long ago. I've known him since he was 13-ish years old. Go back to Seattle. So if you want to know anything about Randy, you know who to come to, okay? So he said financial poverty, not having enough money. Yes, anything else? Hungry, yes, no food. Maybe it's clean water access. Suffering, isolation. No value. These are great words. Agreed. Okay, we're going to look at two frameworks really quick. Lack of material goods is, of course, a major problem for a lot of people. And sometimes the difference between thriving and not thriving does come down to having enough material resources. Without a doubt, that is sometimes true. But looking at poverty being just a material thing is something that a lot of community development experts in the last 30, 40, 50 years have seriously pressed back on. And they have indicated that it's actually a much more complex web of a lot of things intersecting at the same time. We're not going to get into everything, but there's two frameworks that we're going to talk a little bit about today. One is Bridges Out of Poverty by these authors named Payne, Duvall, and Smith. And they say that poverty is the extent to which an individual does without resources in the following 9 dimensions. So there are 9 things that would lend themselves to someone being in poverty. So financial is part of it. There's also emotional and mental and cognitive, spiritual, physical, support systems, relationships and role models, language, knowledge of hidden rules, i.e. class rules, how you act in certain circles, and so on. These guys are very smart, and it frames poverty as something a lot more complex and large than just needing stuff, doesn't it? In fact, the World Bank some time ago released a study where they interviewed tens of thousands of people across the globe who are living in material poverty. And they asked them, what is it like to be in poverty? And these are some of the things that they said. For a poor person, everything is terrible. Illness, humiliation, shame. We are cripples. We are afraid of everything. We depend on everyone. No one needs us. We are like garbage that everyone wants to get rid of. Another one said, when one is poor, she has no say in public. She feels inferior. She has no food, so there's famine in her house, no clothing, and no progress in her family. There's a hopelessness that things will never change. The poor have a feeling of powerlessness and an inability to make themselves heard. If you are hungry, you will always be hungry. If you are poor, you will always be poor. Could you just shout out for me some words in these quotes that stand out to you about what poverty is like? Hopelessness, powerlessness. Yes, always. It's inability, inferior, shame, not being heard, humiliation, one person says, no progress, powerlessness. What you'll notice is that for the most part, they didn't so much talk about stuff that they were lacking, but emotional things, relational things. A lot of people who live in material poverty feel unseen, unheard, and not concerned, like no one's concerned or thinking about them. A lot like that scripture in Exodus, where God actually says, I see you, I hear you, I do feel something for you, and I want to help you. These are relational terms. Another framework that was made popular by two guys, Corbett and Fickert, in the book When Helping Hurts. Maybe you've read it at some point. It's now a fairly old book. It's a bit of a relic of the past, but it's a little bit simpler, and it's to define poverty in terms of 4 broken relationships that are not functioning as God intended them to function. If you remember the scripture from Deuteronomy, God tells the Israelites, before you go out and give to those in need, I want you to remember where you came from. You also were a slave in need at some point. God is appealing to the shared sense of humanity because all of us have experience in these 4 areas of broken relationships, don't we? When we talk about a broken relationship with God, all of us know what that's like. Where we went our own way, we decided, God, I know what you think. I'm going to kind of do things the way that I want to do them. I'm going to stray. I'm going to break covenant. I'm going to sin. I'm going to take my life into my own hands. I have my own will. I'm going to do things this way. We know what it's like when our relationship with God breaks. We know what it's like to live a life without purpose or without meaning. That's a broken relationship with God, and that is an element or a factor of what it's like to be in poverty. Another one that he talks about is, or they talk about, is a broken relationship to yourself. We also probably all know about this. Have you guys ever had seasons of your life that were defined by a sense of lack, of not being good enough, of low self-esteem, of feeling like you don't know if you want to go on, or that you can change? Maybe it's internal accusation. You ever have that running voice inside you that it's always wrong, it's never good? Maybe there's powerlessness. On the flip side of things, some of us sometimes have a bit of a God complex where we want to go in and save people and do, that's also a broken relationship to the self. We all know what that's like. We know what a broken relationship is like with other people. We have our families, our relationships, our communities, the social fabric that surrounds us. We know what it's like to have a broken relationship to those things. And then there's a broken relationship to creation, which is one that I want to park on for a little bit because that might be a little bit confusing. This is the inability to steward resources, to work productively, or to engage meaningfully with the physical world. That's how they define it. What is important for us, and this might be a place where some of the pushback begins to rise, is that this inability to steward resources and to work productively and to have a good orientation to the world around us is not always the fault of the individual. Sometimes it comes up as a result of our relationship to systems in the world as they are. We're going to listen on this next slide to a podcast. A clip of a podcast. It's about 3 minutes. So I hope you guys will be able to hear it clearly. It's an interview with a woman named Desiree about her journey to try to pull herself and her family out of poverty. She lives in upstate New York, kind of in rural New York. And if you've never been out there, there is nothing around. New York is often thought of as New York City, and it's this huge metropolis, and that's true. But like everywhere else in the state, there's a whole lot of nothing. I've spent some time up there. So if you are someone, it's a great place if you want some isolation. Anyways, there is on your handout, there will be a space on one of the pages, on the first page, right under key idea number 1, poverty is relational, not just material. You might find a column that says Desiree. And I would invite you, as you listen to her story, just write down anything that stands out to you that would indicate she has a broken relationship to God, to self, to others, or to creation. If you don't write anything down, don't worry, I'm not grading anything. You're here of your own voluntary effort. But let's listen.
Desiree Metcalf's story is heartbreaking, but not unique. There are many Desirees among the 46 million Americans who are poor today. This one is 24 years old, the mother of three little girls, 6, 4, and 2. They all have different fathers.
That about sums me up, I think.
Desiree is sitting on the floor of her two-bedroom apartment in Bath, New York. A fish tank gurgles in the background. A tiny kitten peeks out from under the furniture. Her youngest daughter is curled up under a blue blanket, head resting on her mother's lap.
Are you shy? No? Okay.
Desiree got married 2 years ago to a man who isn't the father of any of her children, but he recently left her for someone else.
No, I just feel like I get one piece of good news that makes me, hey, life isn't going to be that bad, and then here comes 30 things to basically push me right back down in this hole that I've been trying to dig myself out of for the last probably 15 years.
15 years. Desiree did not just become poor. A lot of bad things happened to get her here. Like others who are poor, she doesn't have one or two problems, but a whole pile of them.
Long story.
Desiree was raised by a single mother, also poor. Desiree says they didn't always get along, and things came to a head when she was 12.
My mom and I got in a fight, and she told me she was going to kill me, and I wrapped a belt around my neck and told her I would do it for her. I ended up in a psychiatric hospital, and from there I went to foster care.
And from home to home to home, she attended 26 different schools.
Seems I just get my bags unpacked and it was time to move again. So
Desiree admits she was no saint.
I used to be an alcoholic. I used to self-harm.
Which means she cut herself to feel the pain. Today she has tattoos on her arms to cover the scars.
I smoke cigarettes like a chimney.
I first knew Desiree when she was 15, and I was in a different agency working with her family with the goal of reunification.
That's Marion Reselman, now with ProAction, a local nonprofit agency, still trying to help.
She did come back and graduated from high school and was all set to go to college
in Florida with a full scholarship.
And then turned up pregnant.
Yup, another single teenage mom. But again, not that unusual. Half of all girls in foster care get pregnant by the time they're 19. Desiree knew that her life had taken a detour.
That was my ticket out of here, so to speak. So here I am, not in Florida.
Like many before her, Desiree carried her poverty into adulthood, doing odd jobs with periods of homelessness and hunger. But here's what's even more disturbing. That poverty is now starting to take its toll on her children, especially her oldest daughter, who recently tried to run away from home in the middle of the night.
She's got some emotional issues, and I mean, we went through everything from making ourselves puke after we eat to running away to wanting to kill themselves, and she's 6 years old.
Okay. I don't know if you heard that last part, but she said that her 11-year-old daughter has tried to kill herself several times. Pretty heavy story from Desiree. Now, I have a question. As you heard the story of Desiree and wrote some of those things down about her broken relationship to others, to self, to God, and to creation, I know we might have a lot of opinions about some of the choices that she's made in her life, but surely we also recognized that there were systems in place that made it much harder for her to try to dig herself out of poverty over the last 15 years. How might Desiree's life have looked different if she had a healthy relationship with her mother? Do you remember she said that she had to run away from home at 12 because her mother threatened to kill herself? And so then she was taken into the foster care system, or sorry, her mother threatened to kill her. So she had to flee and she was taken into foster care and bounced around to 26 different schools. So how might her life have looked different if she had a healthy relationship with her mother? A little more stable, perhaps. Yeah. Then I don't know if you heard later, it said that half of all children who are in foster care, half of all women are pregnant by the time that they're 19 years old. Something there. You know what I'm saying? How might her life have looked different if she had had a different relationship or a healthier relationship with her husband that she had her kid with, who then left her for other people? Maybe she wouldn't be a single mother who is struggling to make ends meet as much, right? I mean, we can see that there's a lot of factors that go into the life that she is currently living. And if she had a better relationship to her community and so on. At one point, she had a full ride scholarship to a university in Florida, and she couldn't get there. That's tough. So agree or disagree? And you can disagree with me if you want. Desiree's poverty is more than just material. Agree or disagree? It would be insufficient to only provide material goods to Desiree long term if we really wanted to address poverty in her life. I agree with myself on that, for the record. Now, let's just walk through some of this stuff just so we're all talking the same language here. No doubt Desiree holds some personal responsibility. She says it herself. She was an alcoholic for some time. She smokes like a chimney. Part of that led to her losing her 2 front teeth, so she was a little bit hard to understand. That's part of the reason why. This story goes on to cover her efforts for 15 years to get out of poverty, but also shows why she was so unsuccessful. Number one, if Desiree gets a job, she said, she's going to lose all of her benefits, including daycare, which would cost almost everything that she would make at a low-paying job in rural New York. She lives in a rural area with extremely limited public transportation and does not have a car. So it would take her hours to get anywhere or to the job. Now, you could say, well, that sounds like an excuse to me, but it's really not if you've ever lived in rural America. This is a real barrier that people face. She is trained as a CNA, so she did some work to better herself and give herself opportunities, but there are no jobs nearby and no places where she can work in that field anywhere close to her. She is missing her front teeth, which impacts her ability to get a job because people can be, have certain feelings about that. And the closest dentist who takes Medicaid, which is the only form of healthcare she has, is 90 minutes away, one way on the bus. There are many kinds of injustice out in the world, all right? And that word gets kicked around a lot, and people invest all sorts of meaning into the word justice. And I know that can be a trigger word for some people, but there are many kinds of things that are not right out in the world. And the Bible talks about it a lot, a great deal. We may or may not be able to fix systemic issues that we see all the time, but it is important for us to be aware of the injustices that our neighbors are facing as we seek to support them. For us to know why a community is the way that it is critical for us to be able to engage in a way that is Christ-like with our neighbors. Because when we're aware of the lay of the land and what obstacles people are facing, it helps us move from judgment to compassion. Don't you feel something for Desiree as you hear her story and go, oh my goodness, she cannot catch a break. There are many hardworking, disciplined people who face material poverty today through no fault of their own. I know many, and I've had the pleasure of working with many in this role. Martin Luther King is, obviously so quotable, but one of the things that he says is that philanthropy is commendable, but it must not cause the philanthropist to overlook the circumstances of economic injustice which make philanthropy necessary. He made this statement above to prompt those who are giving money to particular communities to ask themselves why communities would need the money in the first place. At Hope Worldwide, if we want to be like transformed volunteers in the footsteps of Jesus, if we want to measurably help our communities and be impactful in the ways that we engage, we must ask ourselves similar questions and then be open to tough answers that might not align with our worldview or our perspective or our experience in life. Questions like, have circumstances infringed on individuals' abilities to achieve or maintain their well-being? What factors have resulted in reduced community resources in some areas and not in others? What disparities exist? Why are certain services not available? Why is certain support not available to people groups? Is there racism? Is there other bias? Is there a history that has contributed to material poverty in certain areas, in certain cases? These are good questions for us to ask ourselves before we engage. Answering these questions can help us hear the cry of our neighbors, just like God did within the Exodus story, and enter humbly into stronger partnerships with the neighbors and the communities that we love and serve and support. Does that make sense? Okay. We're through point one, basically, and it's all shorter from here. So the review is that poverty is relational, not just material. 2 scriptures on here. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself. Valuing others above yourselves sometimes comes down to being a better listener. You ever been with someone who only talks about themselves all the time? It's hard to be around those kinds of people. Don't look at your spouse in this moment when I said that, all right? We need to listen better and value the experience of others better than our own at times. The second one, learn to do what is good, seek justice, correct the oppressor, defend the rights of the fatherless, plead the widow's cause. The second one begins with learn to do what is good. Think about that for a second. Doing good does not always come naturally. It's nuanced. We have to learn how to do it. None of the things that follow are all that simple. How do you correct an oppressor? Do you just say, don't do that? I don't know. We have to learn how to do it. How do you defend the rights of the fatherless? I don't know, but I have to learn. I have to commit myself to an ongoing process of theological, emotional, worldview humility to learn how to do what is good and right in the communities that we're walking in and living in. None of these things are simple. And that's why we have to commit ourselves to learning to do what is good. And how can you learn if you don't ask questions? So we just spent, 25 minutes, 20 minutes talking about how poverty is relational and not just material. And we all have it because we've all experienced broken relationships. And if that is true, why do so many of our community engagement efforts boil down to handing out stuff? Someone said it's easier, makes you feel better about yourself. That is true. Well, keep that thought in your minds. How are we doing? Does anyone need a break? Okay, we'll keep going. Key idea number 2. You guys are a great audience, by the way. I think I said thank you for coming out, but thank you for coming out. Key idea number 2, doing with rather than doing for can promote dignity. There's this verse in the Message Bible. I know, I'm sorry to the ministers in here, that's like heresy to read from, but I like this one just for this purpose, okay? So I am totally proof texting this. By the way, I got my theological education starting right here at the Rocky Mountain School of Theology, now the Mountain Theological Seminary or something. I transferred to Lincoln Christian University, but I wouldn't have done it without the support of the Denver church. So thank you guys. Anyways, Glenn would be horrified if I was using the Message Bible. So anyways, if you help, just help, don't take over. If you give encouraging guidance, be careful that you don't get bossy. Do not look at your neighbor. If you're put in charge, don't manipulate. What a good general life advice, right? To all the parents out there, that's important. Now, there's a word that's kicked around a lot in the nonprofit world, especially as we're trying to help communities lift themselves out of poverty, and it's paternalism, which I would define as habitually doing things for people that they can do for themselves. This is a question that's often asked by volunteers am I actually helping or am I just enabling? Am I helping people or am I making it worse? Paternalism is the habitually doing things for people that they can do for themselves. If you are a parent, undoubtedly you know all about paternalism. I have 3 children, 13, 11, and 9, all boys. I wanted all girls. It didn't work out that way, but I love my boys. My middle child, I don't know if there are many parents in the room, but he had this habit always of as soon as he gets home, and he was like between the ages of 3 to 6, he would immediately strip down to his tidy whities. Don't know why he would do that. He'd throw his clothes on the floor, and then he'd just lay on the floor. And on that floor, he would demand things. He'd be like, I need this and I need that. And of course, I'd be like, get up and get it yourself. Like, this is shameful behavior from my child. My mother, however, came into town. And, when I was a child, she would probably tell me the same thing about get up. But Calvin decided to lay on the ground in his tidy whities. And he raised his arm and he said, water. And we live in Atlanta where water is accessible. Okay. We have running water in our house. So he was not dying of thirst. In fact, he has his own water bottle and we take care of him. We do our very best as parents. But he's laying on the floor, a picture of pitiful child. And what does my mom do? As he's begging for water on the floor about 10 feet from the faucet, my mother runs out of the kitchen with a cup to hand it to Calvin. I think Calvin could have done that for himself. And I had to sit with my mom. He'd be like, you do not have to do every little thing that he wants you to do. He can do this thing for himself. So we enable people sometimes. That is true, don't we? Sometimes we do it in unintentional ways. Sometimes, agree or disagree, being paternalistic can hurt rather than help. At times, there's a concept in the Bible that speaks to this a little bit. It's called gleaning. Maybe you know about it, maybe you don't. I am reading from Leviticus today. I bet you did not expect that. Leviticus 19, verse 9. This was when Israel was undoubtedly an agrarian society. Everyone was a farmer, and that was basically the only way to eke out a living of any sort of productivity in a very harsh climate. So everyone is a farmer. So that's why there's so many, rules about oxen and here's what you do and so on, is because they all lived that way. And they needed some ways to think theologically about the resources and the job that they had. And so God is talking to farmers in this case. In Leviticus 19, verse 9. He says, when you reap the harvest of your land, you are not to reap the very edges of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not go over your vineyards a second time to pick up the grapes that have fallen. In other words, you go out once and harvest and then leave the rest. Why would he tell folks whose only economic value comes from what they harvest in their fields to leave some of it? That seems like bad financial advice from the Lord, okay? And besides, it's not even just financial. This is like how they ate. They might not have enough food to feed their family for the winter unless they go out and get it all. That's a pretty radical command to people who are just farmers. Not just farmers. Farmers are amazing. They're like the lifeblood of all of us, okay? But you know what I'm saying? They're farmers. This is how they survive. And he tells them, leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am the Lord your God. That always reads a bit like a threat, doesn't it? So he says, I want you to leave after the first pass, the rest for the foreigner and the poor. Why do you think God commands Israelite farmers to leave a portion of their crops for the poor and the foreigners in the fields to do the work? Wouldn't it make sense that the farmers themselves are more capable than the foreigner or the person who's in material poverty of collecting them efficiently? Because that's what they do. Wouldn't they do a better job of it? Maybe we think it would be more encouraging for the farmer who owns the land and who bought the seed and who sowed the seed and then weeded the fields and tended those crops till they were ready to harvest, then went out and harvested. Maybe it would be more encouraging for them to collect everything and then take a portion after they bundled up the sheaves or put the grapes in the basket and then bring them and hand them to the poor and the foreigner. Wouldn't that be more encouraging for the farmer to do? Maybe we would think that the poor and the foreigner would be exhausted and they don't need more work and they don't need more to do. And they would just love to be given to. God still says, I want you to leave it. And the reason is because it's not about the farmer. The farmer was not the object of God's command. There is dignity in work. When someone is able to act as the solution to their own problems, or at least part of the solution to their own problems, it is humanizing, it is dignifying, and it is empowering. And so God tells these farmers, I want you to leave some of it because it is so important that the vulnerable in your community are able to feel like they are a meaningful part to the solution of their own problems. And there is dignity for them to be found when they are the ones out working in the fields. I am not concerned about you feeling better for yourself and you handing the food to those who are poor. I actually want you to help them find ways to have meaningful work in this life. There's a handout that we are going to read through, and I need a reader, someone who has, a fun time reading a long text, to come on up here. I will just put that out there. Just come on up. We're going to read this story on page 2, right under doing with rather than doing for can promote dignity. It's a Christmas story. This is from a book called Toxic Charity by Robert Lupton. Can you want to come on up here? Please. Wherever you want. Well, why don't Mike? Yes. Okay. Microphone. Thank you.
Where am I starting
start
journalism?
Christmas Eve, all the way down to Good Charity.
To Good Charity. Got it. Yeah. All right. Feel like I need to pray. Sorry. It says, Christmas Eve of '81. I celebrated the season as a newcomer into this urban neighborhood, sipping coffee with one of my neighbors. Bare floors were swept clean and clutter was picked up. The smell of pine saw hung in the air. Front windows reflected the light of the 2 plastic candles. The children, antsy with anticipation, paced from window to window, waiting for Santa's helpers to arrive. When the knock finally came, their mom greeted the visitors, a well-dressed family with young children. A nervous smile concealed her embarrassment as she graciously accepted armfuls of neatly wrapped gifts. In the commotion, no one noticed that the father had quietly slipped out of the room. Not until the guests were gone did the little ones ask where their father was. No one questioned their mother's response that he had to go to the store. But after organizing these kinds of Christmas events for years, I was witnessing a side I had never noticed before. How a father is emasculated in his own home in front of his wife and children for not being able to provide presents for his family. How a wife is forced to shield her children from their father's embarrassment. How the children get the message that the good stuff comes from rich people out there and it's free. Christmas Eve, in that living room, I became painfully aware that not all charity is good charity.
Okay, thank you. Great job reading. I appreciate it. Pretty intense story, certainly emotive. This is a common scene. Around Christmas time, a lot of organizations and folks love to take up toy drives and go hand them out, and it's very good-hearted, and we love to do it because it feels really good. Many of our community engagement leaders across the United States have related to this story. What is going on here, if you kind of can read between the lines, is he would organize the author would organize these Christmas events where typically, wealthy or privileged families would buy gifts for another family. They'd go to their door and then hand them to the family that was asking for the gifts. And what he noticed as he did this more and more was that there was an atmosphere or a tension or a something going on in the room that was not always healthy. What are some words that stand out to you guys about this story that jump off the page for you? Shame. Why would this person feel shame? Yeah, they can't provide in the way that he wanted to. Anyone else? Embarrassment, emasculated. That's a very strong term. And of course, in this, the line, a nervous smile concealed their embarrassment. It's a tough thing for some families to receive in ways that are not dignifying. And we, of course, as we are seeking to transform ourselves to be more like Jesus, want to explore ways that we can get involved and meet the needs of our neighbors that don't contribute to some of the feelings that we looked at in the World Bank study. If you remember some of the, this was the slide that we looked at before, but feelings of, I feel like garbage, I'm humiliated, I'm ashamed, I feel inferior, I have an inability to make myself heard, there's a powerlessness, there's an eternity or eternality to my poverty. I am not saying, just so you guys hear me, that one-way giving is all bad. Like anytime that we just give stuff to people, there are absolutely times and places where that is the most appropriate approach to helping someone who is in need. I want you to think about the term crisis as an example. So one of the things that we do at Hope Worldwide is we work in disaster response. When someone's house is gone, what do you think that they need most? Food, water, shelter, sometimes clothing. It is wholly and absolutely appropriate to assume that you know what they need and bring that to communities in need after a tornado comes through or a hurricane comes through. If we have chapters that work with refugees and people fleeing very difficult situations who have come to their communities with nothing, it is very appropriate to find ways to get them stuff, because stuff is absolutely what they need in the moment. But when we do that in an ongoing way, and we assume that the only thing this person needs is stuff, and so we give them stuff, it may exacerbate the feelings of helplessness and powerlessness that our neighbors are already feeling about their situation and about their life circumstance. And we see that God underscores the value of work and that there is dignity in work. And that's why he tells the Israelites, I want you to find ways to make sure that you involve the community in being the solution to their own problems. So often for us, as we're thinking about how do we engage responsibly and in meaningful ways in our community in higher and higher impact ways, one of the best approaches that you can take is not to be the kind of group that plans everything from the outside, comes in and shows up and hands everything out and then leaves, but rather work with the community on the kinds of events that you want to be doing. Does that make sense? Because then they have skin in the game and they're the ones that are living through whatever it is they're living through, and they can guide and inform and partner with you in being a great partner with them. This is one of the reasons, these reasons, the one-way giving that can be difficult for the receiver is one of the reasons why a lot of NGOs and nonprofits these days have moved from like a soup kitchen style of food delivery to a community kitchen where there are no longer any lines and things aren't so clear who's the giver and who's the receiver. Rather, people will go into a community soup kitchen and they will have big tables for everyone to sit at. There's no longer lines. It's a pretty amazing way, and they'll encourage the folks that are coming in for the food to clean some dishes or to bring, like it's a much more holistic and appropriate way to approach how do I actually meaningfully address food security in this situation. So we're done with 2 ideas already. Key idea number 3. Should we just get through it, or do you guys need a break for like 3 minutes? Get through it. Okay. It's only 11 o'clock, people. We're doing great. Amplifying strength can have greater impact than addressing need. Key idea number 1 was poverty is relational, not just material, and everyone has it. Key idea number 2 was doing with rather than doing for, finding ways to include the community in the solution to their own problems can promote dignity. Key idea number 3 is amplifying strength can have greater impact than addressing need. This one sounds really confusing. We're going to do our best to tease it out. There's a scripture up here, John 4, verse 4 through 9. Famous story. You all probably know it very well. There's some context here that I won't really get into, but anyone from Samaria and anyone from Israel did not get along very well. There's a long history of bitterness and being kind of like mortal enemies, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but they just didn't like each other. And here we see Jesus walking through Samaria, and he has an encounter. This is rare for a rabbi to want to go through Samaria, but Jesus does it because he knows something incredible is going to happen. So Jesus had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Joseph's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into town to buy food. It's an interesting thing for Jesus to ask. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" My question, do you think Jesus could have provided himself with some water? Probably. In fact, he probably could have waved his hands and out of the well would have come coffee. Diet Coke, all right, wine, if you like, I don't know, but like Jesus is like he's God in a bod, okay? He's God in the flesh. And here he is. He could do anything. He could wave his hands and just get water. He didn't have to be tired. He chose to be. He didn't have to be hungry. He could have come and related to us in a very different way. But he asks this question to a woman, which in those times, rabbis were not supposed to talk to women, especially a Samaritan woman. Why would he ask her that question? Was Jesus just lazy and didn't want to do it himself? I don't think so. There's probably a lot of questions or a lot of answers as to why Jesus asked this question. But maybe one of us to consider is that knowing that this was a woman who was probably marginalized by her community because she was a woman with many husbands and, et cetera. She's here in the middle of the day, which would have been weird. Women usually would have gone in the morning to get the water. She was facing a lot. Jesus knew this about her. He can read her heart. Could it be that he's asking her to provide him with a drink of water so that she could enter into this conversation from a position of strength? She had something to offer the Messiah. And Jesus provides her the dignity and the honor of being able to give to him, the guy that was in the position of strength. Could it be? I don't know, maybe. But if you remember the outcome of the story, whatever the reason, it paid off big time. She becomes like the biggest evangelist in the history of the Gospels. Her entire town becomes followers of Jesus. That's pretty impressive. We're going to watch a video. It is in Spanish, so you'll have to read the subtitles, but I'm a millennial, and there's like studies out there that millennials love subtitles, so we don't watch anything without them now. Does that ring a bell? Gen Z too, I think. I don't know. We're gonna watch it, and we're gonna talk about it a little bit. So as we watch this, I just want you to have this concept in the back of your mind. Amplifying strength can have greater impact than addressing needs. And the community that we're about to watch has both strengths and needs. And I would just encourage you to think about them as we watch it, okay?
Mi nombre es Ada Maribel Ríos Bogado, tengo 13 años y toco el violín.
Me llamo Juan Manuel Chávez, más conocido como Baby. Tengo 19 años y toco el cello. Este cello está hecho de una lata de aceite, la madera tirada en la basura y las clavijas son de una vieja cuchara para golpear la carne y para hacer el ñoquis. Y suena así.
La comunidad como Caldeura es un lugar para tener un violín. De hecho, un violín cuesta más que su casa.
En ese grupo acá mismo encontramos el colado de violín. Y de ese empezamos los instrumentos reciclados. La familia que acá vive recicla todo lo que hay en la basura y se vende. No pensaba antes que yo voy a hacer esos instrumentos. Y me siento demasiado feliz cuando estoy viendo a un niño que está tocando un violín reciclado.
Cuando ya escucho el sonido del violín, siento como mariposa en el estómago, así una sensación que no sé cómo voy a explicar.
La orquesta de instrumentos reciclados es una orquesta que toca instrumentos hechos con la basura.
Un, dos, tres y...
Mi vida sería, sin la música, estaría de core y por ahí.
gente se da cuenta que no tenemos que tirar la basura muy fácilmente. Y no tenemos que desechar a las personas muy fácilmente. ¡Fuerte, fuerte!
That I think can't remember what platform, but it's out there. Landfill Harmonic, if you want to know more about it, it's an amazing film. That community, and if we could get the lights on, you know, I hit 40 recently, so I need it in a way that I used to not, which is a bummer. By the way, you know, I've texted Clarissa many times since I turned 40, giving her the opportunity to remind me that I'm not, in fact, middle-aged and old. And she has never taken up the opportunity to dissuade me from thinking that about myself. So just saying. Anyways, amplifying strengths versus addressing needs in this situation and in this community. What needs do you see in that community? Can you just shout them out? Dignity. Sanitation. Yes, they live on a literal landfill. Purpose. Maybe like robust housing, right? Paved roads. Yeah, you see the kids jumping over like the sewage running. Love. Hope. Yeah, these things are true. How about like healthcare? You know, I mean, it can't be good living on a landfill for your health. I'm just saying, probably. But you know what's funny is when I watch that video, I don't see that community as one that just has needs. In fact, I saw a lot of other things that were present in that community. And the defining reality of that community of people is not, man, they're so needy. It's actually something else. They are resourceful. What else comes to mind when you look at that group of people? Creativity, joy, community, unity, tenacious. Good word. That's a teacher word. He's a teacher, you know. Ingenuity. These are amazing people. Like joy and purpose and love and hope and and passion exist in that space. And for us, you know, as a group that is generally probably doing okay in our life. You know, you guys live in Denver. This is not the cheapest place in America to live, okay? You know, and you're here and you're making it work, and it can be very easy for us if we imagine that was the kind of community in our backyard. It would be very easy for us to look at a group of people living in a landfill as one that just needs a lot. And if we then came together and thought about how do we help a community like that, what are some ideas that we might come up with to go, if we're looking at them as primarily a needs-focused community, what would we do to help address their problems? We might think, let's go clean up that whole landfill. What would that do to them if we just bulldozed all the garbage away? That's how, did you see in this, they said this is how they make their living, is recycling this stuff. It's tough living, but that's how they make it. What about maybe for us, we would think what we need to do is we need to take up an offering in our church and buy them new musical instruments. It's crazy that this kid can be producing the music that he does on like an old trash can and things that used to make gnocchis. That when he starts playing that music, it like stops you in your tracks for a second. But what would it do if we took up a collection and we were so sacrificial and we got the best violins, and we got the best trumpets, and we got the best whatever else there is, I'm not a musician, and handed it out? What would happen? It might destroy the community, squash their creativity. What's that? It would make more trash. That's true for you, a little environmentalist in the front row. So I appreciate it, actually. I don't know why I said that. Anyways, I don't know if you noticed, but one of the guys said that a violin costs more than a house. And so if a little girl is walking around with a violin, there might be some consequences to that. Maybe we would think that we should get a group of well-trained music teachers to go into that community and teach those kids how to play, because we have the best, concert halls, and we have the best gifted people in our church. Do you think what might happen in that case? They wouldn't be able to relate. It's good. Yeah. Were there already music teachers in that community that knew the kids and someone said we're like a family down here. So for us to just assume this is what they need and go and do, we might be causing problems that we never intended. And the point isn't to feel bad about that. Might be our impulse. Of course, we have a compassionate impulse and we see someone living in trash. And of course, we want to help and go, that is not right. But we have to at least think before we act, and we have to listen before we act, so that we make sure that however we're getting engaged and the ways that we're connecting with our community is not just addressing their needs, but actually amplifying their strengths, because that is a community that is full of strengths. They were exhibiting great strength in Capoeira. I can't say it very well. I tried. It didn't work. They lived there. Those people were an integral part of their community. They were best positioned to lead any efforts engaging with that community. So if we thought about, then how can we enter into a community like that and actually help amplify their strengths and not just address their needs in ways that might have unintended consequences? What are some things that we might be able to do? Give them a place to play. Come ask them. That's a great start. Always. Yeah. Listen to them. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe they could sell us some instruments out of, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, for real. That's great. Let them teach us how to make the instruments. Yeah, we could even advocate for them. If we know there's great concert halls around here, why don't you guys come play? And so their name gets out more. Maybe that leads to, like, there's ways we can leverage our network. I love the idea of coming in and asking, hey, how can we help? We'd love to come alongside you guys. These are all, there's one more hand up. Yeah. Live life with them. That's right. Isn't that the best kind of community engagement? Ultimately, what's more helpful, for people to come from the outside that aren't part of a community and fix things? Or is it more helpful for people within the community to be integral parts of progress? I think we know the answer to that. There's another slide here, I think. It says, we must make the world, this is from Leroy Barber, great book, by the way. We must make the world more personal so we can care for one another in ways that lift each other up and invite creativity instead of fostering distrust. So we want to make sure that we avoid making people feel like the ways that slide about the World Bake Study was before, inferior or less than or powerless. We want to make sure that our well-intended efforts to help a community don't, have unintended consequences. There are some things that can be done when we enter into a community that do indeed help lift each other up. There's a mutuality to it, and invites creativity instead of fostering distrust. Sometimes organizations or groups can go into a community they're not actually a part of and create distrust even when they have good intentions. It could be as simple as it being very clear who's the giver and who's the receiver in an event. You guys ever been a part of an event like that? What are some ways that you can tell, these are the people who have stuff and this is the people that are receiving stuff? Anything that they wear or stand in or do, how they dress, t-shirts perhaps that all have the same, name on it, might be. All the givers are on this side, all the receivers are on that side. There's lines, literal lines, right? Yes, all these things are true. And whatever we can do to dissolve some of those lines and dissolve those divisions will help us to build and foster trust? What if we were to come into our community engagement, instead of always looking just for needs and what do they need, but rather, how do we discover the gifts and the strengths and the talents of the community that we want to operate in, and dedicate the blessings and resources we have and we have access to supporting the events and the things that they are already doing. Instead of assuming, I got what you need, here you go. Rather, how can I help you in the best possible ways? There's a opportunity now for us to break up into some groups. There's a program analysis on page 4. I think it's on page 4. Let me make sure. Yes. You see it here. What we have on the left-hand side is a list of different activities that often our chapters and our volunteers and our churches do that are all so well-intentioned. Again, this is not me judging any of these things. These all come from a place of wanting to give and show the love of Jesus, and that should be commended. All I'm advocating for is how can we add a little bit of relationship to these situations so that it's not so clear who's the giver and who's the receiver, but rather I'm a brother or sister alongside you. So on the left-hand side are things that we have done in the past or that we continue to do that tend to be one-way giving. Here is me coming in, giving you things, and then I'm departing. What changes on the top is, I guess on the y-axis, what changes could be made to invite neighbors to participate instead of only receiving, doing with instead of doing for, and then there's what changes could be made to better identify, amplify, and support the strengths of our neighbors instead of primarily focusing on meeting needs. So what I would like for you to do is maybe get in groups of like 4 to 6. I'll let you decide how many people you want to be in your group. I'm going to set a timer, and I just want you to pick one of these activities. So you might say, we're going to focus on holiday toy drives. How can we transform those into being something that's more relational and that's more humble to the needs of the community? That's what you will talk about with your group. Does that make sense? And then we'll come back together and we'll share just a few things, and we're going to wrap things up relatively soon. So I'm going to give you guys, I'm not going to like decide your groups for you. As I said, 4 to 6 people, so everyone can share a little bit. I'm going to give a timer. I'll give you 6 minutes instead of 5. It's the kind of person I am. And then we'll come back and close things out. Okay. So you can get up and move around. You don't have to be with the person next to you, but you can. Go ahead. 6 minutes. Okay. Hello. You hear that? There we go. Don't you hate that sound? That wakes me up every morning. Okay. Thank you guys for humoring me. Great job with your groups. Don't go too far because we have one more question after this. But I would just love to hear from some of the groups that got together, maybe an idea or two that you had to transform some of these kinds of events that we tend to rely on in the US. So did anyone talk about backpack school supply drives and how you could transform them? Yes. Can you share anything with us about what you guys thought through or brainstormed? It's awesome. Yes. Bringing the kids into it is a great idea. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, we can have people stand up. I can actually come with a mic. Oh, there's a second mic. There is. It's right up here. I don't want to get too close and cause feedback, but thank you, Hans. Give it up for Hans. By the way, Hans was responding to my emails at like 10:30 p.m. last night. Thank you, Hans, for making all this happen. I think it's, well, did you hear in the back, or do you want him to say that again?
Say it again.
Say it again? Okay, please.
So to summarize what we said, instead of putting the backpacks together, we talked about having the children pick out what they wanted in these backpacks, what they thought would be important to them in their school. So again, not doing it for them, but doing it alongside with them.
It's great. Thank you. One thing that our chapters have done, some of our chapters have done, has been really amazing with this. So probably in your church, you have some teachers, would be my guess. I know one's right there. You might even have school counselors who exist in your church. Oftentimes, they are great folks who know exactly what the school needs. The great part about teachers and counselors is they already have the relationships with the kids and the teachers and the families because they're involved in their life. And so one of the things some of our chapters has done is instead of just donating a bunch of stuff and giving it straight to the kids who are in need, they have created essentially days where kids can have a shopping spree with a voucher system. They'll ask the teacher that's part of the church, what does your school need? The church will collect, they'll give it to that teacher. The teacher then brings, and any child, not just the quote unquote needy ones, are able to go through and figure out with their vouchers, I need these pencils, I want that backpack, I want this and that. They've found a way to have the teachers be the conduit of trust because they're already key members of that community. And then the kids don't feel like I'm the kid that doesn't have enough money to buy a backpack and pencils. All of them are in it together. And it's a party, it's a celebration. They'll have food or they'll have a barbecue or they'll have hot chocolate or whatever. It is a great time. That's one possible way to transform a backpack drive into something that's a lot more relational and trust building for key members of that community to the families. Yeah, in the back there.
So we talked about what did we say, toy drives? So we talked about toy drives, and instead of just giving kids gifts, we have the toys in like a place where like the parents can come and like shop and for the toys and then wrap them themselves.
Yes,
is what we talked about. Similar idea.
Yep. Amazing.
And the kids can choose gifts to give to their parents or their siblings as well.
That's also great.
We talked about.
Yeah, involving the kids in it. Thank you for sharing that, because that was going to be my next question, was who talked about holiday toy drives. Similarly, exactly what you're describing. Some of our chapters have done something called a community Christmas store. Everyone loves toy drives. Like, there is no doubt we love being able to give toys at Christmas, and we all want the kids to have fun toys. I'm going to knock that over. I don't even know why I walked up here, but I'm up here now. So some of our chapters have done something called a community Christmas store. So what the church will do, or the chapter will do, is they'll collect a bunch of new toys, high-level stuff, fun things, and then they will put on a store that looks like a retail store. It'll be a whole church effort, and they'll set up all these, stations, and they'll have shelves full of brand new toys that are discounted at like garage sale prices. So there was a time when like Razor scooters were really cool. Do you guys remember that time? Are they cool still? I don't know. But they were like $50. So they'd sell them for like $5. So a mother could come into that store and feel like, I am actually shopping and the one providing. I'm not just a charity case. I'm buying all these scooters from my friends and my family and my children. And then there's a gift wrapping station, which is a great idea. Their kids can come in, and then they take all the money that they get and they don't pocket it. But the chapter then uses it as like seed funding for whatever their next event is going to be. And it's a way, and they'll make, again, they'll have food and they'll have Christmas music. So it feels like a whole experience that is a lot more dignified than just being the recipient of, a gift that you had nothing to do with. These people could go in, they had agency. They were able to pay with their own money that they earned, even if it was a whole lot less than it would normally be. And they felt like, I am the one who provided these gifts to my kids. What did the person in that story said? It's not just the rich people coming in and the stuff out there is free. I provided it for my children. It's a way to transform what is typically a one-way giving event into a community affair. And it is so encouraging. If you're ever interested, we can help walk you through that as an organization on how to do it. The next one, what do we have? Community/soup kitchens. Any ideas how to make this more relational? Yes, up here in the front, next.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
The Pearsons and us, our families, we work together to run a soup kitchen once a month for the chapter here. So this was very eye-opening and humbling because we did everything that you said we shouldn't do.
Please do not feel There is no judgment. As I said, thank you for what you do.
No. So some of the things that we talked about, how do we make small steps and small changes? So we're thinking of hope t-shirts, right? Like just be once together on the same level with them. We wanted to try and figure out a way, because we serve outside of the soup kitchen right now with just a line of tables. How can we maybe set up some more tables and sit down and have some conversations? Because most people take the food and go somewhere else. So how do we actually create an environment where we can have discussions with them, and hopefully then we would learn a little bit more about where we could maybe serve and meet those needs, and then potentially have them help us to set up the tables and clean up afterwards. So
thank you so much for what you just shared. And I just want to know, there was no intent on making anyone feel guilty. I honor your service. I honor everything that you're doing. And thank you for being humble enough to say, how can we just take a little step to make it more relational? If you remember nothing else, all these events, all that we need to ask ourselves is, how do we try to incorporate relationship into this event? What's a better way we can kind of meet eyeball to eyeball with someone, not just on the other side of the line? But go ahead.
Yeah, so my group, we also talked about the community soup kitchen and stuff. And so we had the idea of like making them like cooking classes, more like people can come in, we can use food from the food pantry, or even actually ask them what they want to eat or what they want to make. And like maybe have somebody part of the community that we're trying to help teach them how to cook these meals, how to stretch meals, how to really get the most out of the meals that they're making, and they can feel, more dignified. Like, all right, I made this meal for myself. A meal always tastes so much better whenever I make it myself, So it just like really empowers them to have these meals, and to build community within these soup kitchens.
Totally. That was a great comment. But you have a great voice too, by the way. You should be like a sportscaster or something. Totally affirm that. People that are coming into some of these community soup kitchens have so much talent. They are sometimes great cooks and they have a lot to teach us. So finding ways to tap into their talents is a great way to help them feel like they are a part of this event and not just a recipient in the event. Last one that we'll talk about for now is the food pantry. Any ideas? That's another common way. I don't think you guys have one here in Denver as a chapter that you do, but yes, right there.
So I have a friend who does run a food pantry, and one of the things that she has always done is her volunteers at the food pantry are the community that she serves. And so they set it up, they check each other out, they take care of it, they communicate what they need. So it is very much a community food pantry. Her job is to try to get in donations, but everything else is run by the actual people that are served by the food pantry.
That is awesome. Love it. Getting folks in the community to volunteer. They want to be a part. They want to offer and help. Thank you, guys. Those are great ideas. Okay, we're going to keep going. Again, the framework that we should have is, how can we just make this event a little more relational? If that's in the back of our mind, we are well on our way to having transforming engagements just like Jesus did. We have one more question that we are going to discuss in our groups. We're going to be done in 8 minutes. Okay, so if you're antsy and you're like, I got to get out of here, this guy's not stopping. 8 minutes, we're going to stop. Okay. I actually don't know that. Let's see here. Can you advance that slide, or is that the end of it? If it's the end, then it's the end. Is that it? There we go. There's a lot of words. Now, I want you to get back in the same groups that you were in. You're only going to talk about one of these questions. So just pick one of them, okay? I'll read them out loud so you have time to chew on it. Number one, and again, if you're in a group, you're just talking about one of them. What does it mean to amplify strength rather than just address need? And what are some examples of each? Number two, in non-crisis situations, why is it not bad? Why is it better to focus on a person's strengths rather than simply responding to their immediate needs? When you meet a neighbor who is going through a hard time, how do you identify their strengths? And once identified, how do you support those strengths? Or number four, when you are engaging with a community, what are the first steps towards recognizing and understanding their strengths, and how do you then support and build on those strengths? So go ahead and break up. I'm going to give you 4 minutes to talk about this. We'll have All right. Time is up. Okay. Thank you guys for discussing some of these questions. If it's okay with you, I'm just going to get one response per question. If no one talked about any one of these questions, that's fine. We'll be out of here even earlier. But did anyone speak about number one? What does it mean to amplify strength rather than address need? And what are some examples of each? Any groups talk about that? Okay, in the front. Thank you. Thank you, Hans. Yeah.
Represent. Yeah, we basically said like addressing the need would be like solving the problem for them. And so amplifying strength would be giving them all the resources they need, like teaching them what they need to know to be able to actually sustain that like solution that we can provide. And one example was we said before, like teaching them how to cook their meals. Another one would be simply like educating them on, you know, the situation and like how they can like better move forward.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I like that. Thank you. Number two, anyone talk about in non-crisis situations, why is it better to focus on a person's strengths rather than simply responding to their immediate needs?
All right. So yeah, our group had number two. We thought it was better to focus on somebody's strengths rather than like what they need in the moment, because I feel like if I'm in a situation with somebody and let's say they're hungry, and it's a non-crisis situation, but they're just hungry, they need food. I think if I am just focused on what they need, I'm like, oh man, like you need this, you need that, and really like kind of emphasizing that, it's easier for that person to like just be mindful of all the things that they don't have, all the things that they are lacking, and kind of like go into this kind of inward, maybe like spiral of like, man, I'm not good enough, I don't have enough, I'm this, I'm that. But if you focus on, okay, some of the strengths or some of the positives, I guess what our group was saying is just like, if you focus on the negative, it's just easier to just think negatively about the outlook that you have. If you are intentionally trying to think about positive things, it could have a more positive outlook on kind of the situation.
Man, thank you for that. Yeah, no one likes to be someone's charity case, you know, and helping them. That was a great response. Okay, number three, when you meet a neighbor who's going through a hard time, how do you identify their strengths? How do you even know what you're working with? And then how do you support them in those strengths? Anyone talk about that? If no one did that, okay, up here in the front. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so after hearing Greg's response, I kind of realized that what we talked about, the second question answers it. But Clarissa put it beautifully. And she said, assuming there are strengths. And I think it's really easy to just compartmentalize people of like walking up to someone and being like, oh, you're someone in need. This is how I see you now. But instead seeing them as the whole person that they are and were created to be. And then we didn't actually get to the second one or like the second part of that question.
That's okay.
But yeah, just assuming there are strengths and engaging in those conversations with them.
That's awesome. Thank you. Okay, last one. On a community level, how are you able to identify what the strengths are in a community? You want to take a stab at that? It's a tough one. Oh, okay. Well, actually, we had three. Courtney, Lee, you know. Oh, not Courtney, I guess.
Hey, everybody. So we talked about engaging with the community. What are the first steps in recognizing, understanding their strengths? And I feel like the answer is pretty simple, but the implications of it can get really time consuming. And that's, you have to engage in a community consistently and intentionally, have intentional dialogue.
That's right.
Really try to empty your own assumptions, have conversations. Yeah. And so that's just going to take a lot of time, which is, you know, it's just part of relationships.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. This is for sure a more time-consuming approach to figuring out how to help our neighbors in need. But thankfully, God has all the time in the world to hear our cries, doesn't he? In Exodus 3, he was there amidst it, and so shouldn't we be oriented that way to the communities around us, asking questions, getting to know folks within it. So we're going to wrap things up. Thank you for that, Lee. I appreciate it. Three key ideas that we talked about today. Poverty is relational, not just material. Doing with rather than doing for can promote dignity, and amplifying community strengths can have greater impact than addressing needs. My last thought is that you struggle to wrap your mind around all these concepts. All you have to do is think about, how do we make this a little more relational? How do we remove some of the barriers between giver and receiver and just be fellow human beings on the journey that we're on in this life together? How do we incorporate relationships? How do we move from handouts to a stronger sense of community? How do we move from the giver, the receiver, to relationship? How can we help draw out the strengths in our neighbors that we see in profound ways? If you would like to keep learning with Hope Worldwide, there are many resources on our website. That's our CEO up top. That's Ben Barnett. And there's all sorts of lessons. If you're trying to figure out how to start a chapter, how do we grow? What do we do? There's places for you to click. You can also just contact me, and I would be more than happy to help or discuss any of these things with you more and more. There is an opportunity to have a post survey. Basically, did you learn anything here? And maybe that's a no. And I would like to know if you learned nothing. Then that would be very helpful for me to know. So actually, I'll go back to that. I'll leave it there. You don't need to see Hope Worldwide. Thank you guys for being here today. As I said, I know Saturdays are precious, and you chose to spend it with me, some guy you don't even know, all the way from Atlanta, and that is deeply meaningful. I want to say thank you guys. And this is not tongue-in-cheek in any way, but we could not do anything that we do on a global level without volunteers and good-hearted people like you. The fact that you did come here after a giant snowstorm and you took the time to sit for 2 hours, whatever, how long ever it's been, and talk about these concepts. And you guys have been one of the most receptive, warm, interested audiences that I have had the pleasure of speaking to about this. Says so much about your hearts and so much about your discipleship. I see that you guys are concerned about your neighbors because you know that is what Jesus calls us to be. And I know that with that heart, whatever you choose to do and however you choose to engage, God is going to bless it. I know that it takes time, and it can feel overwhelming, and it can feel confusing, and it can feel difficult, and I don't know how to get involved, and I don't know how to do it, and it can be like a paralysis of analysis sometimes. Am I doing something that helps? Am I doing something that hurts? I just want to lay all those things down just for a second and remind you that all of this is done in the name of Jesus and the name of God. And anytime that we dedicate well-intentioned efforts to that effect, I know that God will use them and bless them in some way. He's already been working through you guys. This is just helpful tools to increase impact and increase engagement as much as we can. I pray that it's been a blessing for you because it's been a blessing for me. And just imagine that if every Christian that we know decided that instead of just assuming I know what the world needs, I'm going to commit myself to being someone who is proximal to suffering, who is proximal to the cries of the vulnerable and the needy, and just went out of their way to listen and be present in relationship. That could transform our communities faster than anything else that I could think of. So thank you for your time, and may the Holy Spirit continue to transform the hearts of the Denver church. Clarissa's coming up. I almost forgot to close us out. So I'm done talking. Thank you guys for listening. I appreciate you. Go ahead. Yeah, sorry. I'm just getting all my stuff out of here.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Matt. Not going to touch that. Yeah, I know. I just leave these spaces feeling so excited. I feel really inspired and encouraged. I feel like being part of the Denver church and getting to be involved with Hope Worldwide have been two of my greatest blessings. And the overlap of interacting in those spaces has been a space that I feel like I've experienced Jesus in a really profound way. So I'm just really grateful that you all are here to do the same. I'm going to shift for a second and talk logistics, because this is obviously an amazing space, but we're trying to prepare ourselves to be able to now go into our communities in a really meaningful way. And one of the ways that we want to be able to do that in the Denver church is using something called Volunteer Hub. So if you've been around for a while, you might already have an account with Volunteer Hub. You might know what this is. If not, I'm here to explain that. So basically, Hope Worldwide provides the Denver church with our own page on Volunteer Hub, which is basically just to help organize the different involvements and engagements we want to have in our communities. And so if you scan that QR code, it'll bring you to this page that is specific to the Denver church. And so I am not your Denver Hope Worldwide chapter director. I'm just a girl. But I am trying to help organize the logistics to try to make it really accessible for people to engage. And so if you are interested in trying to organize some kind of community partnership, please call me or come talk to me afterwards. I would love to help make sure that your event gets put on Volunteer Hub so that people can participate. But I really quickly want to run you through how to make an account on Volunteer Hub so that you can volunteer. This might feel very like elementary. I think you'll be able to do this pretty easily. I'm sorry, yes, but I understand that some of these skills are more difficult for some people than they are for others. So we are going to walk through it. And again, I would be so happy to help you make an account. So this is my clicker, I guess. I don't know. This is funny. I don't know how to do this. Okay, great. So yes, if you go to that QR code, you can also access this website. If you go to our Feeding the Homeless event on the church app, you'll find the link to the Volunteer Hub website, but you can just create an account, click that button on the top right. From there, it'll bring you up just to a page where you can make a username and a password. After that, you'll click that you're a general volunteer. We don't have an active Hope Scouts happening right now. And then they'll ask you all kinds of questions that you'll just fill in as needed. You'll notice at the end, there are some questions that will ask for some of your background just to ensure safety as we're engaging in our community. And you'll be asked to put down a reference with just a name, email, and phone number. So please do that. You'll only have to do this one time as you make your account. But then you'll just have to sign a waiver and a volunteer code of conduct. And that's it. So once your account is made, again, that will be set up so that when you sign up through the church app to do our different volunteer opportunities, you'll have your account made and can just sign up through Volunteer Hub moving forward. Again, I know this is kind of annoying. It's an extra platform that we're working with, but it definitely helps with so many things, just organizationally, safety-wise, and also just trying to keep track of what we're doing in our community and making sure we're doing it well. So again, I'm happy to help if you would like help signing up for Volunteer Hub. We'll try to kind of keep pushing this as we develop more and more partnerships in the community. But yeah, that's a quick note on Volunteer Hub. Again, I just want to say thank you all so much for being here with us today. I'm going to invite Alex up to come pray for us to close us out.
All right, we're going to pray to close this time out. But before I do that, I think we should give a big round of applause for Clarissa and Matt. Thank you so much, Clarissa, for setting all this up. This was incredible. But Matt, thank you so much for your expertise, for sharing with us so much wisdom, so much helpful guidance for our programs here. I think that's just invaluable stuff that we can be learning today. For our programs that we can be doing as a Denver church for a very long time. It's just really helpful to learn sustainable ways to serve that builds relationships. And I think my big takeaway is just, I want to build relationships anytime that I'm trying to serve. I don't want to create this chasm between me and the people that I serve. I want to be able to do this in a way that builds relationship. I think that's the way Jesus would want this. And so thank you so much again for that. That was incredible. I'm going to pray to close out this time, and then we will all be dismissed. Dear God, I want to thank you so much just for the God that you are, that you care for us, that you see us, that you are so compassionate and gracious. And I'm grateful for the ways that you've blessed all of us to be in a position where we can serve, or we have the resources that we need so that we can then go out and help other people around us. And God, I just pray that you fill all of our hearts with your spirit, with a spirit of compassion that is working in ways that you want us to work, that is following the guidance of your spirit to serve in the ways that we need to serve, to give of ourselves in ways that we might not even feel comfortable giving, but help us, God, to be giving and to care about the needs of people around us. God, I pray that you transform the Denver church and transform the communities that surround the Denver church because of us and because of your spirit, God. We love you so much. We pray for so many great things in our programs because of this training. But we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, you are dismissed.